How many times have you studied, read a book, or started a course only to remember almost nothing after a few weeks? Years later, I realized the solution to this. The way to truly learn something isn't by reading, it's not by listening, it's by explaining it to someone else. And this changes everything that's been recorded. As Naval Ravikant says, teaching makes learning. I'll share ways to make the information in this video permanent. Grab your coffee or lunch, focus, and watch until the end, because if this video ends, your perspective will be completely opened. Part 1, the nature of learning. Start looking at the characteristics of learning. Learning is essentially the process of adapting to new information and experiences. In other words, new neural connections are formed in your brain. This is far beyond memorizing, because it's not just about absorbing the details of a subject, it's about processing and making sense of it. Think at your speed. Your brain has countless speeds. As you learn something new, new bridges begin to be built between these changes. The more repetition and practice you have, the stronger those bridges become. Just like a muscle today. Just as a muscle gets stronger with exercise, your brain strengthens its connections as it learns. This process is called synapses, and neuroplasticity is suggested as the brain's ability to change. In other words, the brain truly adapts to everything it learns. There's also the memory aspect of the subject. Let's say you're reading a book. Initially, the information is incorporated into short-term memory, but if you don't make sense of it or repeat it, it disappears there. Repetition, practice, and understanding are essential for long-term memory. Therefore, it's necessary to stay with the "I've read, I'm done" principle and work on it. Emotions are also crucial here. They strengthen the brain's emotional connection and store it more permanently. For example, it's no wonder the number of the first item remains. Or never forget your personal phone number. If there's emotion, the information remains. Beware of another factor. Wherever you focus your attention, your brain processes it. It's impossible to learn everything you don't pay attention to. Furthermore, sleep is just as important as attention. During sleep, information in short-term memory is carried over for the long term. In fact, studies have shown that those who sleep after studying are much faster. In other words, their brains are working while they sleep. Finally, you need to know this. Learning isn't just about seeing or hearing. For example, you're studying a foreign language. You haven't seen a word yet. You need to use it, explain it to someone, and put it into a sentence. This is because the brain stores used information in long-term memory. The information you use is doomed to be forgotten. In short, learning isn't a random process. Your brain has clear standards. If you understand this power, you'll be much better at understanding why the learning techniques we'll discuss next work. Now let's delve a little deeper in the next section. Part 2, the contribution of teaching, sharing, and writing to learning. We're exposed to an incredible amount of information throughout the day. The things we read, the videos we watch, the conversations we hear. But the funny thing is, we forget most of it very quickly. I've experienced this many times. I'll start a book, read it, and finish it. A week goes by, and I don't remember nearly half of it. There's actually a very simple reason for this. If you don't apply the information you learn, if you don't review it, your brain sees it as useless information and gradually erases it. The brain says, "This information isn't being used, so I don't need to expend any energy." There's a very interesting theory here, the learning pyramid. It was proposed by Edgar Dale in the 1950s. According to this theory, you only retain 10% of what you read. You remember 20% of what you listen to. When you watch a video, retention increases to 30%. But the real difference comes when you're activated. When you discuss, apply, and put into practice, retention suddenly increases to 50%, even 70%. And the culmination is this: when you share what you've learned with someone else, in other words, when you teach it, that knowledge becomes 90% permanent. This is where the Feynman technique comes into play. You may have heard of it. It's a method developed by physicist Richard Feynman. It has 4 steps. First, you choose a topic and learn it. Then you simplify it as if explaining it to a child. You notice the points you get stuck on, the points you can't explain. You go back to those points and learn, and then you explain it again, simplifying it. This cycle forces you to both understand and retain that knowledge. I've used this a lot in my own life. After reading a book, I'll share it with others. Sometimes I'll share an idea with close friends. Over time, I've realized that these stories stick with me much more. I've gone even further. I've started writing down what I've learned. Writing on Medium has actually been a second learning process for me, because I'm processing the information anew as I write. And it's not just about writing. I share a short piece of content on Instagram, then write about the same topic in more detail on Medium, and sometimes I turn it into a YouTube video. In other words, by processing the same information in different formats, I both challenge myself to repeat it and share it with others. That's why I can tell you this. Don't just try to keep what you're learning in your head. Write it down, explain it, and share it. Tell your friends, tell your family, share it on social media. Keep a journal, summarize it, write it in your own words. Because when you express everything you learn, you're actually learning it anew, and it becomes much more permanent in your mind. In short, sharing is the greatest investment in learning. Now, in the next section, let's discuss the most effective learning techniques. Part 3, Learning Techniques. Teaching the information you've learned to someone else is truly the most permanent method, but that's not all. There are other very powerful techniques you can use. One of these is spaced repetition. Think about it this way. The information you learn enters your brain's short-term memory. If you don't focus on it, your brain sees it as unnecessary and deletes it. That's why you need to repeat it periodically. For example, let's say you learn a new word, you study it the first day, 3 days later, you look at it again, a week later, another time, then a month later, you repeat it. You start with frequent repetitions, but over time, you increase the time between repetitions. Thanks to this method, the information becomes firmly ingrained in your long-term memory. It's actually the same in life. You might forget someone's name immediately when you meet them, but when you repeat it a few times and you continue to use their name when you see them again, it becomes permanent. That's how spaced repetition works. In fact, this method was developed by German scientist Ebbinghaus in the 1800s, along with his forgetting curve. It remains one of the most effective methods today. The second powerful technique is active recall. This isn't just rereading information over and over, it's the practice of mentally recalling it. For example, if you're reading a book, close it and ask yourself, what did I just read? If you don't, the information quickly evaporates. In fact, this is the exact principle of taking tests. You learn the information, then you challenge yourself with tests. It's no wonder that students preparing for university constantly take tests. They're honing their brain's recall muscle. The third method is the Feynman technique. Let me explain it in detail. First, you choose the topic and learn it. Then you simplify it, like explaining it to a child. You see where you stumble, go back and address any gaps, then you explain it again. This way you digest the information. This method is very effective because it reinforces learning through explaining. Another method is taking notes. But when I say taking notes, I don't just mean recording the text. I mean processing the thought. When you take notes, you process the information a second time. There are different techniques for this, such as the Cornell method or mind maps. You can choose whichever suits you best. A physical notebook or digital applications are suitable. The key is to take notes in your own words. Let me also mention the Pomodoro technique. Your brain needs a break after processing information. If you work nonstop, your learning efficiency decreases after a while. This is where Pomodoro comes in. Focus for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. This cycle not only increases your focus, but also helps your brain consolidate information better. In short, spaced repetition, active recall, the Feynman technique, note-taking, and Pomodoro. These are methods that accelerate learning exponentially. Once you start applying them, you'll see how quickly and permanently you learn. Now let's look at the impact of your environment, attention, and habits on the learning process. Part 4. The effective environment, attention, and habits on learning. Learning isn't just about techniques. There's something else equally important. Your environment and habits. Because if your brain isn't operating in a learning-ready environment, you won't get the results you want, no matter what technique you use. Let's start with the environment. The simpler your physical environment, the less likely you are to be distracted. In a crowded, cluttered space, your brain is constantly stimulated, making it harder to focus. So create the cleanest desk setting possible. Only have what you want to learn on your desk. There's also the issue of noise. Sometimes silence is best, and sometimes music that helps you focus. Sometimes I like listening to lo-fi, sometimes classical music, but some days I just want silence. What matters here is your mood and the task at hand. Another point about the environment is the principle of visibility. That is, keeping what you want to learn in sight. If you're studying, you can hang a board in your room, stick note cards on it, or keep the book you're reading in front of you at all times. Your brain is very sensitive to these triggers. When it comes to attention, you can think of your attention like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. But if you're constantly distracted, it never grows. And today, the thing that steals our attention the most is our cell phones. Notifications, social media, screens. These are constantly disrupting our brain. Silence your phone while working or put it away if possible. Don't even show it on your desk, because even when you see it, your mind wanders. Another point for deep focus, single tasking. That means no multitasking. You can't watch a training video and scroll through Instagram at the same time. Your brain can't focus on two things at once. Choose one task, finish it, and then move on to the next. This accelerates learning incredibly. Your habits are just as important as your environment. Let's say you read for 15 minutes every morning. It seems like a small thing, but over the course of a year, it turns into dozens of hours of learning, the same time, the same place, the same ritual. Your brain loves this repetition. Learning becomes easier when you get into a habit loop. Of course, sleep is essential at the end of the day, because during sleep, your brain consolidates information. Most of the information you absorb during the day is actually transferred to long-term memory during sleep. Without adequate sleep, learning doesn't happen. Scientific research shows that at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep is critical. Nutrition is also the brain's fuel. The brain consumes 20% of your body's energy. If you don't eat enough or your blood sugar is unbalanced, it becomes impossible to concentrate. You've probably experienced that lethargic feeling that comes after heavy, processed foods. At that moment, your mind slows down and your learning capacity decreases. Therefore, a balanced diet, omega-3 intake, and drinking enough water are the unseen supporters of learning. In short, no technique will work properly if you don't set up your environment and habits correctly. First, prepare the groundwork. Get your desk, your phone, your sleep, and your nutrition in order. Then what you learn will truly stick. Now let me share with you what I did on my own learning journey and how I put these words into practice. Part 5, my own observations. I'd like to talk a little about how this process unfolded for me. I've always loved learning. During my university years, I started reading a lot, especially research-based books, but I realized that simply reading wasn't enough. So I started sharing what I was learning with friends and family. I'd share things over coffee, saying things like, I read something like this, I learned something like this. And I realized, when I share information with someone else, it becomes much more permanent and brings me joy. Over time, this became a habit for me. I couldn't stop sharing whatever I learned. Then I followed people sharing information on social media. Their content inspired me, and I thought, why not share what I learned? Thus, the brain momentum was born. I started blogging, creating content for Instagram, and making videos on YouTube. As I shared what I learned, it not only strengthened my own self, but also helped others. This gave me an incredible sense of satisfaction. I can say this clearly. When you share what you learn, not only does your knowledge last, but your thinking also sharpens. Learning has become a motivation for me. It's now my lifeline. By learning something new every day and repeating it in different ways, I add value to both myself and others. It's truly a win-win situation. I've found a few things very helpful in my own journey. First, always share what you've learned with someone. This doesn't have to be on social media. Share it with your family, friends, and close friends. Second, make sure you have a notebook. It can be physical or digital. I use Notion, sometimes I use Apple Notes, and sometimes I save it in apps like Goodreads. The key is to put the information in your own words. Writing is a secondary learning process. Another point is to repeat the same information in different formats. For example, I share an idea first on Instagram, then write it down on Medium, and sometimes I turn it into a video on YouTube. This allows me to repeat it periodically and makes the information more permanent because I process it from different perspectives. And of course, I organize my physical environment accordingly. I kept my desk simple, set reminders on my phone, and implemented methods like Pomodoro for focused work. These have become habits for me now. At the end of the day, learning isn't just about gathering information. It's become a part of my life. For me, learning has become both a joy and a way of life. And I can say this very clearly. When you start sharing what you learn, you'll see a completely different transformation in your life. So my advice to you is start by sharing, even if it's just something small. As you can see, the most powerful ways to learn aren't just reading or listening. What truly lasts is sharing, teaching, and writing. This is what I've realized over the years. Knowledge grows stronger when shared. You can start by sharing a small thing you've learned. This doesn't have to be on social media. You can tell a close friend or write it down in a small notebook. But when you start sharing, you'll see that what you learn will become more permanent. And these small steps will change your perspective over time. Your ideas will sharpen and your learning will deepen. You'll find yourself truly growing. Thank you for watching this video. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Your comments give me new ideas. You can also turn on notifications to be notified of new videos. See you in the next video. Take care.